There's a book that was written. It's actually called Soundtracks. It's by an author named John Acuff, which is where a lot of these the general ideas of the soundtracks in our minds came from. And he wrote this quote, and I thought it was so good. He said, "Many of the soundtracks in our lives and in our minds didn't come from a movie we watched, or I would say something we experienced. Many of the soundtracks in our minds came from something that someone said to us." So many of the soundtracks in our minds didn't come from what we experienced. It came from the words of someone else and something that they said to us. Some of the most defining moments in our lives weren't shaped by events, but they were shaped by the words that were said. One sentence has sat with us for decades. For some, it was positive. It was, "Hey, great game. I love you. I'm proud of you." Others of us, we heard things like, "You can't do anything right. You're overweight. I want a divorce. I don't trust you." Many of us, our lives have been shaped by the words that were said to us, and they've stuck and they've played on repeat in our minds. And here's the thing, that words, they don't just fill space. I think many times we think that like the words that we say, it's just something that I said. It just fills this space that's in our lives, but it's not a big deal. But the fact is that words either build us or they break us. The words either build us or break us. I go back to, I was thinking about like what are some pivotal moments in my life from when I had a mom and a dad who just constantly said, even when I didn't want to hear it, like, "I love you." I feel like those formed me. There was one at my youth pastor when I was in high school came to me and he said, "Josh, God is going to call you one day to ministry." And how I responded to him was not very kind because I cussed him out. But
here you are.
Here we are. So it was something that was said to me that formed me. What about you? We were talking about like both positive and negative.
Yeah.
Like what's some words that were formational for you?
Yep. So I can remember, I've had a lot of people speak very positive, but since you shared a positive, I'll go the opposite and share a negative.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, I was actually a really good student in school.
I believe it.
So there you go. So I had...
a good student?
A great student.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to my need for achievement that's not healthy and all the things.
Okay,
But I was a great student. So anyway, I had a teacher that I really looked up to, I really admired, just a great teacher. I had been accepted into a lot of, bigger schools and had the opportunity to go there with some great scholarships. But then I felt very called. I could go through all the details of how this happened, but I felt very called to a small Christian college in North Georgia called Toccoa Falls College. So it was like the least of the colleges on my list were you looking at it from an achievement standpoint. And so I was so excited. I had made my college decision. I knew it was where God was leading me. It was to Toccoa. So I went in and I was ready to tell my favorite teacher. And I said, "Hey, I've decided on my college. I know that God's leading me to this college." And he said, "Why are you going to throw your future away like that?" And I was like, because at that moment, this was somebody who I had looked up to, who I had admired, who I thought valued me. And in just that one sentence, all of a sudden I started questioning, like, okay, am I ruining my future? Like, what, why would he say that? And it's still something I can replay in my mind. But thankfully, I had other people in my life, counteracting that with, "No, if this is what God has called you to do, then do it." And I met you there, so there we go, right?
I met your boy, right?
Hey.
It's crazy. As we've just been sitting here for a couple minutes and talking about the things that we remember, you can recall back to 10, 20, 30 years ago, specific words that were said to you. And why is that? It's because words create worlds. And so many of the words that you've received have shaped the world that you live in. How you view things, how you see things, how you see the world around you, how you see yourself, how you see your family and your friends. And so this morning, the direction we wanted to go was a little bit different and ask this question, how can we, if words create worlds, how can we be the supporting voice in someone else's soundtrack? I really do believe that soundtracks are created, if we create them the right way, the right soundtracks are created by who God is, what his word says, and what he says about us. But you and I have a part to play in that, to be the supporting voice in someone's soundtrack, not the one that tears down. And when you look through Scripture, over 100 times it talks about not just words, thousands of times it uses the word words, but over 100 times it talks about the power of our words. And so where we want to go this morning is, because we got to do some work before we can get to what does that look like, but the question is, how can I be the supporting voice in someone else's soundtrack?
Yep, so the first thing, like Josh said, we have to realize that our words have power. So if we look in Proverbs 18:21, it says, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." So the "it" in that second part of the verse is referring to the tongue, and actually the power of the tongue to produce either life or death through our words. So let's break it down a little more in that verse. So again, "it" is the power of the tongue, how we are using our speech. And then the phrase "love it," that's referring to embracing or indulging in speaking, whether it's good or harm. And then "eat its fruit" is that we'll all experience the consequences of what we say. So to kind of sum it up, if we love to speak, we're going to reap the results, whether those are good or bad results, whether it's encouragement or blessing or harm and destruction that are a result of our words. So obviously, if God gave us the ability to speak, which he did, there has to be a God-given purpose behind what we're to use our words for, right? And I think if we want to understand the God-given purpose of our words, we have to look back at how God used his words. So if you go all the way back to Genesis, God spoke the entire world into existence with his words, right? His words weren't random, they weren't by chance, but his words were used for a very specific purpose. They were used to create. And all of us in this room, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, we were all created in the image of God, right? Yeah. So if he's given us this ability to speak, our words have a purpose, he used his words to create, then if we're made in his image, we can also use our words to create. But we're in control of what our words create, right? So we may not be able to create galaxies. I may not be able to create animals, all the things. That'd be kind of neat, but I can't, okay?
Nope.
But what we do have the ability to create when we're using our words for God's purpose, we can create joy, we can create peace, we can create courage in ourselves and in others. But then if we're using our words how we want to use them apart from God's plan, we can create fear, regret, shame, anger in us and in others. So there's a pastor and author, Brennan Manning, and he says, "In every conversation, we are either giving life or draining it. There is no neutral." So you have to think, okay, if all of my words either have the power to give life or to drain it, how many opportunities do I have to do this on a daily basis? Yeah. Well, we talked about how many thoughts we think on a daily basis. So now we're going to break it down to how many words we speak on a daily basis. So I'm going to throw it out there, shout it out. How many words do you think on average we speak on a daily basis? Anybody? 1,000? 10,000?
No nudging anybody and being like...
Yep. Okay, so... what was the number
Somebody
here?
said 75.
Okay, all right. So
man of little words.
Studies show, on average, we speak 16,000 words a day, on average.
On average, yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, is that, I've got to ask the question, is that across the board? Men and women?
Okay, men and women. Well, since it is Mother's Day, ladies, let me bust a myth for you today. Okay? So we often, right, myself included, think that women, and it's been said, I think women speak twice as much as men. Well, ladies, I'm here to defend you today. Studies actually show that on average, men and women speak the same amount of words per day. And like we said, on average, that is 16,000 words. Okay, so way to go, women. All right.
Let's talk about this for a second. But I would imagine, too, when we talk about words, we're talking about spoken words.
Yep.
But we live in a day and age where we're also talking about, text.
Yep.
Emails.
Yep.
Facebook, all that stuff, right? Like all the
And all those are
forms of
still
communication.
forms of speech and
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah.
So that's still your words making it from here, out, right? So we've got to consider those words too. Yeah, that's good. So again, that's why the writer of Proverbs is trying to show us that our words can either bring life or death. So again, he gives us some great advice if we are wanting to make sure our words are bringing life. In Proverbs 15:28, he says, "The heart of the godly thinks carefully before speaking. The mouth of the wicked overflows with evil words." So in other words, we've heard this said all the time, but do we practice it to think before you speak? And I would say the best way to think before you speak is to slow down, right? Not just to say what immediately comes to your mind, but to slow down and process, is this what I should actually say in this moment?
That's really good, really good. So our words have power, and really one of the biggest reasons why they have power is because our words just don't come from our minds out of our mouths. They actually come from our heart. And so all throughout we see this connection between our heart and our words. One place specifically, it talks about in Luke 6:45. It says, "The good person out of the good measure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks." And so Jesus is talking here, and he's talking about the fruit of a person's life, how our outward actions reflect our inward character, what's going on inside. So maybe you've heard before in movies, like when someone's like, "I don't know what to say right now," or like this guy has a crush on a girl, and he's like, "What do I say?" And the advice they give is like, "Hey, just speak from your heart." The movie insinuates that we have an option to not speak from our heart. And what Jesus says is we don't have an option. Like everything that we say, it's not optional whether it comes from our heart. He says whether you know it comes from your heart or not, it actually does come from your heart. And so what we see here is not just our words have power, but our words are a window. Your words are a window. And so the words that you say actually reveal what's happening inside of you, or maybe what has happened inside of you. Whether you build up or you break down, it's not a door, it's not a window with shades, it's a wide open window where you're just showing everybody, whether you know it or not, what's going on inside of me. Now, even when we think of it that way, doesn't it make you want to rethink your words sometimes? Like, because just your words just naturally expose you. They expose me. Like, it's just the minute you speak, window. Like, I hope for me even, like, as I'm talking now, but when I talk, I just think window. Because it's just showing what's going on inside. And so as Jesus is talking in Luke 6, he says it this way, that our heart is like a storage center. It's not just an emotional engine. So it doesn't just drive what we feel, it actually stores things. And so you draw from what you've deposited. So when we speak, we're making draws on what is stored up inside of us already. So what we store up determines what eventually will spill out. And many times we find that under pressure, under stress, under anger, under hurt, what flows out is the window into our hearts and into our souls. So for many of us, let's just be real. Our words, how we speak, it exposes and shows the window to some unhealed wounds in our hearts and our lives. Some things that have been done to us or said to us over years or maybe years ago. And because we didn't do anything with that, we didn't allow those things to heal, then we're just letting them flow out of our mouth. And that hurt flows out of our mouth. Some of us, it's unmet expectations. Some of us, it's unmet and unsaid, unspoken expectations. And so you had expectations of someone and they did not meet that. Maybe it's a father, a mother, a friend, a boss, a coworker. And you had these expectations and they did not meet those. And so the way that you speak to your kids and to your friends is just a window into the fact that that person let you down. Others of us, it's grief that hasn't been dealt with, hasn't been worked through. I think grief is a process. It's not a get over your grief and you're done. Loss is hard. But when we choose to just shove that grief and that loss down and not do anything with it, well, what Jesus says is it's not that you're not doing anything with it, you're just storing it really deep. And so in the moments when stress arises, when fear, anxiety, when anger, or when pressure arises, guess what spills out? It's that grief, it's that hurt, it's that loss, it's that pain. And so sometimes what spills out in anger is really just our pain. And so when we talk about speaking from our hearts, we've really got to do some work about what does that really mean. Now, I also say, when we say speaking from our hearts and we say speaking life into someone, some of us disguise and mask like our bluntness and our passive aggressiveness with I'm just speaking truth in life. You know that person. I can be that person sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. I didn't know we were doing this here, so okay, no, I was just kidding. No, really. No, it's real. Like I cannot slow down, and really I cannot slow down, and I can just be in a moment and just speak just whatever comes to my mind first. And so it's not that it came to my mind first, it's that it came from my heart first. And then it came through my mind and then out of my mouth. And so I'll say, like, I was just telling you the truth, but I didn't think about was this going to build you up or break you down. I just thought about me getting my truth out. And that's not speaking life. That's speaking from pride. And where's that pride? It's not in my mind. It's in my heart. I know better. I know best. I can fix this, I believe. And automatically what that does is well up pride. And I think I'm being helpful, but I'm actually being hurtful because I'm not dealing with the pride in my own heart first. And so our words, they're a window. And so for some of us this morning, like the next step for us is we don't need to change our words as much as we need to spend some time examining our hearts. And we've got to maybe work through some things. I think that's why we said the first week of the series is that for some of us, it goes deeper than just saying, okay, I'm going to sit a few minutes with God and examine my heart. Some of us, that's it. That's the start. But others of us, like, there's years of hurt and pain. And we've got to figure out what to do with that. And many of us, we've suppressed it and shoved it down for so long, we don't know what to do with it, which is why we believe in counseling. And so you can actually go on our website. It's citychurch.cc/care. You can scroll down to the bottom of that, and we will connect you with a counselor. And beyond that, we'll actually pay for your first session of counseling because we just believe in it so much because we believe that's one step of where healing can come from. Inviting a professional person, a counselor in your life that's a Christian that can speak into that for you. Because many of us, we want to speak life. Like not many people are like, man, I just want to tear people down all the time. Right? I don't think we're like that. Like now we may feel that sometimes, like I want to tear that person down. No, but in our heart of hearts, if we step back, that's not what we want. But it just because what's stored up inside of us just flows out. That's what we get. And so we've got to do some work of examining our hearts, saying, okay, God, why am I saying the things that I'm saying? Why do I want to say the things that I'm saying? And then how can I heal so that I can say the things that I want to say? Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about how our words have power, how they come from our heart, but then we need to realize that part of God's purpose for our words is that our words are for others. So we have to start to ask the question, who should I be speaking life into? Who needs my supporting voice the most? And here's the thing. Overall, everybody needs encouragement, right? Every single person in the world needs encouragement. I don't think any of us wake up on a daily basis and say, I'm just looking for somebody to make me feel worse about myself today, right? Like, I think we do a good job of doing that to our own selves, right? So we all are in need of encouragement. Yeah. But here's where I think the enemy just tries to thwart this. It's pretty ironic, but I feel like we often speak the most life to the people who are furthest from us. And we speak the least amount of life to those who are closest to us. And I believe that's a huge tactic of the enemy to tear families apart, to keep families from experiencing the God-given purpose and community that's to be found within families, right? I think it is because we aren't dealing with our own pride. Maybe some of us were never spoken life into, so we don't know how to speak life into somebody else, right? So we often see that. I see it in my own life. I see it in the lives of others. We do a great job at being kind and encouraging to those farthest from us because we can keep them at arm's length. And we're not speaking life into those closest to us. So I think we have to do the hard work of changing that and say, okay, God's putting these people in my path daily. Why am I not using my words to speak life into them?
That's good.
Okay? Why am I not giving them a compliment? Why am I not encouraging them for what I'm seeing them accomplish? Why am I not, trying to pray for them when they're experiencing a hard time? Whatever it is. And I think, again, it's because we have to look at our hearts first. And I think the challenge is we have to flip that, right? And we have to say, yes, I'm still going to show kindness to those who are far away from me, like the cashier, the barista, those people that it may be easy. But realize the greater weight comes when we can learn to do that with those we are daily in contact with, even if they're not doing it to us in return. So again, I think we've got to start closest and then move outward to make sure we're speaking life to those who are closest to us. So I think our question then becomes, well, how do I even know if I'm speaking life, right? Well, Josh already mentioned sometimes we have to get our pride out of the way. But I think in Ephesians, we are given the best way to know if we're speaking life to someone. So Ephesians 4:29, it says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." So I think you have to ask yourself, and this isn't like, I'm just going to say nice words to everybody, right? God's going to call you to love those closest to you. Sometimes you have to say hard things. Yep. But you can learn to say those hard things in the way Christ intends us to say those hard things, out of truth, love, and grace, right? So those hard things you feel that you need to say to those closest to you, take time to put those before the Lord in prayer and say, God, how am I supposed to say these hard things? But I think you have to ask yourself, is what I'm going to say, is it helpful for building this other person up? Yeah. In the long run, are these words going to help them to understand more of who God is and who they are in Christ? If not, then you have to ask yourself the question, why do I want to say this to them? Is it just to get it out, right? Is it just because I want to say it? You have to ask yourself why. And then will it benefit those who listen? Again, is what you're saying, is there a benefit to those who are going to be listening, whether they see it at the time or not? So that's just a good verse when you're trying to say, should I say this to this person? Is it going to build them up in the long run, and is it going to benefit them in pointing them to Jesus and pointing them to their identity in Him?
So good. Yeah, I think the question to ask is, because sometimes it's what we say. We shouldn't say what we say. Other times it's not what we say, it's how we say it. And so asking the question, is this going to build them up in the long run, or is it going to make me feel better about myself? Because many of us, the way that we say things isn't for the building up of the person, it's to make us feel better about ourselves and how we said it and what we said. And so is this truly going to build this person up? And so that's the vision and the heart and the hope is what if your words became a soundtrack for the people around you? So the hope is that we'd walk out of here saying, I'm going to be the supporting voice of someone else's soundtrack. And not in the distance. I want to be the supporting voice of my spouse's soundtrack and my kids' soundtrack, of my parents, of my friends, of my coworkers, of my neighbor that gets on my nerves. I'm going to be the supporting voice in his soundtrack, no matter what. And you said something, just slid something in there. No matter if it's reciprocated to me or not. No matter if it's said back to me or not, I'm going to be the supporting voice. I mean, just dream with me for a moment of this. What if people looked forward to hearing your voice because they know they would leave feeling more alive? What if someone saw you and looked forward to talking to you, or saw a text message pop up because they knew when they left their time with you, they would feel more alive? Like, who doesn't want to be a part of that? Who doesn't want to be that? And so we step into that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's 3 practical questions if you're like, okay, how do I begin to then use my voice in somebody's life? I think the first thing all of us can do is identify who that one person is you feel like God's laying on you today as we're talking. Identify that person, and I would say even let them know, like, hey, I would like to make a commitment to speak life into you. I would like to make a commitment to encourage you how you need to be encouraged. And I would say I don't think God's going to call you to the people you're already doing that to. You're already doing that, right? So I think He's going to, it's easy, right? So look at those people closest to you and say, who is it that I'm around daily, weekly, that I just never really speak life into? or it's hard for me to speak life into. Identify that person and let them know, because then that encourages them to know, like, hey, I have somebody who's going to speak life into me. So ladies, the second part of your gift, we wanted to give you kind of a tangible way to do that. We're going old school and giving you 2 friendship bracelets, okay? And we want you to wear one as a reminder when you really want to fuss at that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I going to get the
Maybe.
friendship bracelet?
I don't know. I got to pray about it. But
No, you do a great job with me. You do so good encouraging me. Like, stop.
no.
Yeah.
But when I look at that bracelet, I'm remembering, hey, I'm praying for Josh today. Like, I want to figure out how I can encourage him this week. He's the person I'm committing to. Now, the bracelets are more girly, so Josh may not want to wear it, right? But I can wear both as a reminder of, hey, I've made this commitment to him. Or I can give it to him. He can display it, whatever he wants to do, right? Yeah. But if you want to actually give that bracelet to someone, I think that's just another step of obedience of saying, hey, this is maybe hard for me to admit, but I am accepting this, as something God's calling me to do, to speak more life into you. So with your journal, you're going to get 2 bracelets and just a tangible way for you to identify that person and let them know. Again, men, you might have to go to the dollar store and get your own friendship bracelets, okay? It's okay.
We'll work on that.
But I will say the next thing, before you can actually speak life into that person, the step for you may need to be apologizing to that person first. Okay, and saying, hey, I have not been the voice of encouragement to you that I know I should have been. Because people aren't going to receive encouragement from you if there's an elephant in the room that has not been addressed, right? So you may need to first make that apology so that you can break down that barrier and then speak life into them. But then also, we can't pour out something that we don't have, right? So the third thing I would say is, again, identify those broken soundtracks in your life. What if people said to you that have affected the way you view yourself, which then affects how you treat people? So work on identifying those broken soundtracks so that you can know who God says you are, so that you can then encourage somebody else to show them who God has created them to be.
This is the hope for this morning, that we leave here believing and saying that when people leave from their time with me, they're going to have life spoken into them by my words. They're going to be excited to see me, because that's what's going to flow out of me is the life that Jesus has given me and spoken into me. And so why don't we